In 2011, the Arab Spring Revolution swept across the Middle East, from Tunisia to Egypt, Bahrain and Syria. For more than 50 years, a quiet American scholar has been helping people bring down their dictators. His tactics of non-violent resistance have been used in revolutions from Serbia to Ukraine and Iran.
To be counted as a threat to a tyrant is a matter of pride, I would say. It means we're effective. It means we're relevant.
This is the story of the power of people to change their world, the modern revolution, and the man behind it all.
Gene Sharp's tactics and theories are being practiced on the streets of Syria as we speak now.
My name is Gene Sharp, and this is the work I do.
What do you do? How would you describe your work?
That's always a problem, describing my work. Primarily, I try to understand the nature and potential of nonviolent forms of struggle to undermine dictatorships.
This is a technique of combat. It is a substitute for war and other violence.
His handbook to revolution, from dictatorship to democracy, has been smuggled across borders and downloaded hundreds of thousands of times.
We don't know quite how it spread, but it certainly did into 30-some languages in different parts of the world, on all continents except Antarctica.
The hallmarks of Gene Sharp's work can be seen in revolutions all over the world. Gene's books contain a list of 198 non-violent methods of resistance.
The famous 198 methods. This seems to have been an extraordinary response. That's simply the 198 specific methods, the specific forms of strike or economic boycott or civil disobedience or protest. Exactly the counterpart of military, different kinds of military guns or bombs in a military struggle. Unless they have something instead of violence and war, they will go back for violence and war every time.
In 1983, Gene Sharp founded the Albert Einstein Institution to spread the knowledge of non-violent struggle. For years, people living under dictatorships have been coming here to East Boston for help. Jamila Rakib has worked for Gene for more than 10 years.
I began learning about the work at a very basic level. I did most of my reading and learning as soon as I started working at the institution, and I was hooked.
I didn't start out to do this. I had a religious background that led me to want to leave the world in a bit of a better place, in better condition than when I came here. And how to do that was always a problem.
In 1953, Gene was sent to jail for refusing conscription to fight in the Korean War.
I had a 2-year sentence. I did 9 months and 10 days. In those days, you counted the days as well as more. But I don't think that my action there did any good whatsoever. But it was just to keep my sense of my own integrity so I would carry on in work that I thought was really important. I never met Einstein, but I wrote to him. I don't know how I got his address. I said, well, I'm about to do such and such and go to prison. But by the way, I've written this book on Gandhi. There's 3 cases of Gandhi, 3 quite different cases from each other, of Gandhi's using nonviolent struggle for greater freedom through not just nonviolent means. And he wrote back that he was very much hoped that he couldn't know, but he hoped he would have made the same decision I did, and he would be willing to look at the manuscript, which I had sent to him, and he did so and wrote a very kind introduction to the book.
While studying at Oxford, Gene had his eureka moment, a new analysis of the power of people to bring down a tyrant.
If you can identify the sources of a government's power, such as legitimacy, such as popular support, such as their institutional support, and then you know on what that dictatorship depends for its existence. And since all those sources of power are dependent upon the goodwill, cooperation, obedience, and help of people and institutions, then your job becomes fairly simple. All you have to do is shrink that support and that legitimacy, that cooperation, that obedience, and the regime will be weakened, and if you can take those sources of power away, the regime will fall.
And how did you feel at that point?
At the point, that eureka point?
Yeah.
Oh, greatly relieved. Greatly relieved, because that's what made it all reality.
While teaching his theories at Harvard, Gene was about to meet an unlikely champion of his work, Vietnam War hero Colonel Bob Helvey.
I first met Gene Sharp at Harvard University. I was an Army senior fellow up there for a year. And one day I saw a notice on the bulletin board about Program for Nonviolent Sanctions at 2 o'clock this afternoon. So I had nothing to do, so I went to see who these peaceniks were and to confirm my preconceived notion that they probably had rings in their noses and ears and dirty. And so I went up there just to see them. And surprisingly, they weren't there. I saw, regular-looking people there. And a few minutes after we all sat down, this little short, soft-spoken gentleman comes to the front of the room and says, "My name is Gene Sharp, and we're here today to discuss how to seize political power and deny it to others."
I say nonviolent struggle is armed struggle. And we have to take back that term from those advocates of violence who try to justify with pretty words that kind of combat. Only with this type of struggle, one fights with psychological weapons, social weapons, economic weapons, and political weapons. And that this is ultimately more powerful against oppression, injustice, and tyranny than is violence.
That got my attention. This is the flag of the 5th Battalion, 7th United States Cavalry. The 7th Cav, as you know, was the regiment of General Armstrong Custer, who fought and died at the Battle of the Little Bighorn. That's me in my younger days. Full head of hair. This is the award for the Distinguished Service Cross that I got in Vietnam.
In 1968, Bob was deployed in Vietnam. He was decorated for bravery during a Viet Cong ambush, but his experiences there would change his views on the way conflicts should be waged.
I think Vietnam influenced my view about the importance of nonviolent struggle, and particularly the importance of getting Gene Sharp's ideas out to the rest of the world, because we must have an alternative. Vietnam convinced me that we need to have an alternative to killing people.
As a US defense official in Burma, Bob had seen the military dictatorship there persecute the minority Karen people. After leaving the army, Bob traveled back to the rebel camps to teach the Karen Gene's lessons in non-violent resistance.
I was talking to one of the Karen commandos, and he says, "Where in the hell has this information been? We've been fighting and killing people for 20 years. How come we didn't know this?" Some of the Burmese came up to him and asked if he would write something for the Burmese on how to move from a dictatorship to a democracy. That's the origin of why the book was written, the Burmese.
I couldn't write about Burma, honestly, because I didn't know Burma well. And you should at least have the humility not to write about something you don't know anything about. So I had to write generically. If there was a movement that wanted to bring a dictatorship to an end, how could they do it? And so I wrote those series, and they were serialized there, and published in English and in Burmese. And I thought that was it.
In 1989, Gene traveled to China at the height of the demonstrations in Tiananmen Square. It would shape his views about the importance of planning and strategy.
I'd gone to Beijing after the Tiananmen Square protests were well underway. That whole event, which it should be remembered, was not just in Beijing, but reportedly in 350 other cities of China. Similar protests were going on, but they were not planned. They were not prepared. There was no strategic decision. There was no advanced decision how long you stay in the square and when you leave. The students had no plan. They were improvising all the way through. And later on we know that many of those Chinese people who were out in the streets to block there in another day were shot and killed. The attitude that you simply improvise and that the improvisation will bring you greater success is nonsense. It's actually the opposite. That if you don't know what you're doing, you're likely to get into big trouble.
The government of Slobodan Milosevic in Serbia presided over years of crimes against humanity and brutal internal repression. The regime fueled the creation of new democracy groups in the country, fighting for his removal.
I went to Budapest at the request of the International Republican Institute, which was providing support to the Serbian opposition movement. And one particular part of that opposition movement was Otpor. That's a Serbian word for resistance.
He's a retired colonel and he has this type of the military approach, and you know the way he speaks, it's really something that, you know, creates a strange impression with a bunch of students, leaders.
We talked for a while and I said, well, something's missing here. We haven't talked about who's the leader of this organization. Who is the leader? And then one guy says, we don't have a leader. And I said, well, wait a minute, guys. I did not fall off the turnip truck coming over here. Somebody has to lead an organization that has mobilized the entire Serbian society.
So we spent probably 1 hour fooling him about some stuff. And the reason for this was that we were not very comfortable about giving the details about the organization to the foreigner.
And then they explained to me, you know, why there's no, quote, leader. It was to keep it away from the government. The government doesn't know who's in charge. And I later found out I was talking to the leader, Sergei Popovich.
Bob began teaching Gene Sharp's lessons to the new Serbian revolutionaries.
When Bob Helvey gave us the Gene Sharp's Politics of Nonviolent Action, we were quite amazed. Partly I was ashamed that I didn't know about such a book before, even if there was a translation of From Dictatorship to Democracy in Serbian, but I never seen it. And seeing the knowledge of how power operates and how pillars of the support operates, and all of this stuff we needed to learn hard way throughout our experience, written systematically in one place was quite an amazing thing.
One of Otpor's first tasks was to create a symbol of resistance to help unify the people.
It's obviously that we are the majority. If we can just recognize all of those who are against Milosevic by, saluting each other with a fist, he would probably be over within a few years.
Atomization is when the regime attempts to make every individual in the society an isolated unit. It's one of the main ways that totalitarian systems seek to control their populations, make them all fear of each other, fearing to speak out and to act together, never telling a neighbor or even sometimes a family member what you really think. By seeing the example of the demonstration of bravery by other people, now it's we. And we can do something that I alone could not do.
During the 96-97, we were walking day after day after day, and the police was blocking streets, and our numbers were start falling because it was obviously too boring for the people to demonstrate every day in a harsh winter. So we said, okay, why won't we go home and try to make noise from our balconies? And we were doing it from 7:30 to 8 p.m. as a response to the state TV news. That was the answer of the people. This is what we don't watch your crap. We do our own thing. From the pots and pans to doing the stickers, so the stickers can be done in every building. And also the things like, will you go and prosecute the kids for wearing Otpor t-shirts when there is not one single law which bans wearing anything on a t-shirt? So, for the policemen getting inside the high schools and arresting high school kids only because they were wearing the t-shirt, and then going home and talking to their wife, whose friend was complaining because her son was arrested, having a dialogue with your kid who is coming now from his school where nobody wants to spend time with him or her because their father is, beating kids from my neighborhood. And now, this systemic oppression doesn't work.
These pillars are holding up the government, like my fingers are holding up this book. And I develop a strategy to undermine each of those pillars: the police, the Sangha, or the religious institutions, the workers, whatever. Every organization. And as they weaken and start to collapse, the government will collapse when those pillars are broken. Ideally, we want those pillars not destroyed, but transferred over to the democratic movement.
If you want these pillars to shift sides, you need to co-opt people. This is exactly what Otpor was done. We were telling the police that we are both victims of the same system. There is no reason to have war between victims and victims. One victims wear blue uniforms, other victims wear blue jeans, but there is no reason for this conflict. And this worked, really worked. And it worked in Georgia, it worked in Ukraine, it worked in many other places in the world. This is the way you do. You go and co-opt from discursive pillars. You don't throw stones to the police.
There's many people in conflict situations that really would like to use violence, but their opponents really have more military weapons and weapons of violence, which are usually physical weapons, than the potential resistors have. So if the resistors choose to fight with violence, their opponent has all the advantages in that situation because you're choosing to fight with your opponent's best weapons. But you can choose to fight with a totally different kind of weapon than these nonviolent forms, which are much more difficult for the opponent to counteract.
Big concentration tactics are very difficult to control. You have 20,000 peaceful demonstrators, you have one idiot breaking out the window, and these people got all of the media attention. So this is the message which can efficiently undermine your movement. You go on the march and there is a risk of the people getting arrested. So what would you normally do? Instead of putting the big guys in front, you will put the girls in front. You'll put the grandmas in front. You'll put the military veterans in front. So the police is now faced with the friendly faces. And these people are actually carrying the flowers and the banners and smiling. So you make the situation less threatening, so you make the possibility of violent outcome really smaller. October the 5th should be seen in a context of a successful strategy, and that was not the day like many spectators of media like CNN. They just see this big bunch of people, revolution, boom, and it's over. It was first of all 10 years of attempts and failures, and 2 years of existence of Otpor, 5 different campaigns, and we were setting the victory on the elections.
In September 2000, Serbia went to the polls. But Otpor expected Milosevic would fix the election.
We knew that Milosevic will lose, and we knew that he will not accept the fact that he has lost. So around 3 p.m. you had like 200,000 to 300,000 people on this square, and there was a non-violent takeover of physically of this building. And this is where the people who broke into the building at the October the 5th found many leaflets pre-marked for Milosevic. So this is where we, actually the physical cheat was taking place on the second floor of this building. It was more like symbolic takeover. Because what was the real takeover was that Milosevic lost power that day. Because police disobeyed, because he ordered the military to get from the barracks after 3 p.m. and they disobeyed. This is where he lost the power. What you were looking on the TV and physical overtaking of the building was just the symbol of him losing authority that day. I think what we learned from Bob and what comes and derives from Gene Sharp thinking and writing influenced the way we think, and also made our struggle more efficient in a very important point when we were preparing for a decisive struggle. And yes, I think what Bob and Gene are doing is precious around the world, and we strongly believe that the nonviolent revolutions cannot be exported or imported, but the knowledge on how to successfully implement nonviolent struggle can and is transferred from one group to another as we speak.
I felt good that here was a revolution that occurred nonviolently. There was no violence on the part of the democratic opposition. And it shows that what Gene was talking about year after year after year, there are realistic alternatives to violent conflict.
Well, I mean, after Serbia, we were working with Georgians and Ukrainians and Lebanese and Maldivians and Iranians and Zimbabweans and Colombians and Guatemalans and West Papuans and the groups from places in the world I couldn't literally find on the map.
And then from Serbia, the news spread to Georgia, which was under a very repressive regime, and then to Ukraine, which again had problems, and it spread there, and then to a series of other countries in the stands of the southern tier of the former Soviet Union.
Vladimir Vyatrovich was a leader of Ukraine's Orange Revolution. He used Gene's book to convince activists that there was a powerful alternative to violence.
В цих таких протестних середовищах панували доволі різні настрої, зокрема, були люди, які готові були до якогось силового протистояння. Книжка, про яку йдеться, це книжка Джина Шарпа «Від диктатури до демократії», і головна думка цієї книжки про те, що з диктатурою слід боротися ненасильницькими засобами, була дуже близькою нам, і це, власне, головна думка, яка сформувала десь протести, які вилилися в 2004 році в помаранчеву революцію. Я думаю, що навіть безпосередньо з книжкою, з ідеями Джина Шарпа було знайомлено десь, може, десятки тисяч людей, а з ідеями, можливо, навіть не розуміючи, що це ідеї Джина Шарпа, і цими ідеями заразилися вже сотні тисяч людей, учасників помаранчевої революції. Якщо говорити про його ідеї, навіть якщо люди не знають, що це, власне, ідеї Джина Шарпа, то, я думаю, вони є дуже поширеними і дуже впливовими у світі.
On the top floor of Gene's home is his orchid house, a refuge from the work below.
They take quite a bit of work. That became very important because it was something I could treat as they needed to be treated, and not expecting miracles, but if you don't treat orchids right or anything else in life, then it's not going to thrive.
How did it feel watching your work spread?
Oh, that spread was really quite remarkable. I was thinking, I'm still amazed. I'm still amazed. So to have this piece, which I regard as very introductory, I think it was maybe 70 or 80 pages, to take off like that, was a confirmation that the analysis was more or less accurate. It didn't spread because of good propaganda or some sales pitch. It spread because people found it usable. They found it important.
The books are there, the literature is there, it's online, it's in people's homes and people's hard drives, and it's being disseminated at a level where that cannot stop, and it cannot be stopped. People go to great lengths to discredit this work, and there was one case where President Chavez had referred to our staff as the bunch of gringos at the Albert Einstein Institution don't understand Venezuela. And I thought, well, it's true that we may not fully understand the situation in Venezuela. It's probably quite complex, but I'm not a gringo.
Gene Sharp, George Bush y sus ideólogos de este golpe suave mecha lenta, señores, este plan de ustedes aquí en Venezuela, olvídense.
In 2008, the Iranian government broadcast a propaganda video accusing Gene of working for the CIA.
کاخ سفید، واشنگتن دی سی. جین شارپ، نظریه پرداز نافرمانی مدنی و تئوریسین انقلاب‌های مخملین که تألیفاتی در این موضوع دارد. وی از اوامر CIA جهت نفوذ در کشورهای مورد نظر می باشد.
Now you've seen our office, you can see how well funded we are.
In a way, I was impressed that we were on the radar, that they had Gene Sharp sitting at the White House. And in a way, I thought, I wish those in the White House would listen to us. I wish they would request a meeting with us, but they don't. We sit here, we operate out of our two-room office. We have no connection with the White House.
It just doesn't happen. We don't do that.
We are absolutely not a CIA front organization. And it's really ironic because we see this charge in the press and among various groups quite often. And we always wonder, where is this coming from?
After the Iranian elections in 2009, opposition groups declared the result was a fix.
There are thousands upon thousands of people streaming down through the main boulevard, all heading in the same direction. It's quite something. They're waving green flags. People are hanging out of cars, giving the V for Victory signs. I was not sure people would turn up given the warning, and I'm wrong.
Thousands of protesters exploded onto the streets of Tehran. The government response was brutal. During the uprising, a young Iranian student, Neda Agasultan, was shot by a government sniper. Her image would become a rallying call for the opposition.
When people are slaughtered, when they are beaten, this produces a process of what I call political jiu-jitsu, in which the opponent's supposed strength is used to undermine the opponent by alienating more people from supporting that regime, mobilizing more people into the active resistance.
It's a kind of backlash effect. If the regime is so brutal, then instead of intimidating people, which the regime intends, it causes other population groups and institutions to withdraw their cooperation and their obedience, and that loss of power and control, that more people join the resistance.
Yassin Athanadis was arrested by Iranian intelligence while reporting the Green Uprising.
When I went to see the chief prosecutor on the second day that I was in prison, he looked at me when I took off my blindfold, sitting in his office, and he said, "Do you know why you're here?" And I said, "No, I mean, I have no idea. I've just been arrested, 2 nights ago." And he said, "Well, there's a very serious accusation against you." I said, "What is that?" He's like, "Are you sure you don't know?" Espionage. The interrogator kind of patted his laptop and said, "This laptop contains a Persian language translation of Gene Sharp's From Dictatorship to Democracy, which is a handbook for insurrectionists. And it gives them several dozen easy ways by which, if they only follow these ways, they can overthrow a government, a legitimate government, any kind of government." I've read this book, and so have my colleagues.
When the organizers of the uprising were arrested, they were charged with using over 100 of Gene Sharp's 198 methods.
What this work does is show people that they themselves can be responsible for their own future, for their own liberation.
People are beginning to liberate themselves. They don't have to depend on an outside power. This is Sergei Lykat, named after Sergei Popovich. But they don't have to depend on an outside power. They can do it themselves. And can you imagine how good that makes a country feel? That we did it ourselves. And that's why it's so important that we transfer the skill and knowledge. There's no reason for the United States to be occupying anybody. We're not good at occupying anybody. Neither was the Soviet Union good at occupying people. Let the people alone. Give them the power to change their government if they want it changed.
To be counted as a threat to a tyrant is a matter of pride, I would say. It means we're effective. It means we're relevant. It means out of this very small office, we produce work that threatens regimes. And I think that's pretty cool. Yeah.
This was the beginning of the Egyptian revolution. The uprising was spontaneous, but Egyptian democracy groups had been working on the strategy for years. Egyptian democracy group Kafaya first visited Jean in Boston in 2006. 5 years later, former Serbian revolutionaries were training new groups on the outskirts of Cairo, and Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood hosted Jean's work in Arabic on their website. When the moment came, these groups were ready to guide the revolution.
Well, let's go live to Tahrir Liberation Square. We can speak to a freelance journalist who joins us on the line now. Rory, we were hearing about those heightened security measures today around Tahrir Square. Is there a different atmosphere here compared with, say, yesterday and the day before?
Yes, it's an incredible atmosphere today. That cross-section of Egyptian society that left Tahrir Square yesterday is back in force now. They've managed to re-energize the protesters, very young children, women, older men here. People are singing and dancing. There are many instruments in the square, and it's more full here than it has been in days.
Ahmed Maher was the leader of Egypt's April 6th democracy group.
مستنيين الحدث اللي هيكون شرارة اللي هيحرك الناس كلها بصورة كبيرة. كان في محفزات كتير حصلت، لكن الشرارة نفسها اللي تحرك الناس كنا مستنيينها. ودي كانت تونس. بالفعل كان في اصلا بين مصر وتونس منافسة في كرة القدم باستمرار يعني. فقد يكون ده يعني ازاي احنا بادئين من قبل تونس ولقينا ان تونس سبقتنا وقامت بالثوره، فليه احنا مش كده؟ كان كل الناس كاتبين على الانترنت الاجابه تونس. طبعا بالتاكيد كان في تاثير جيد لكتابات جين شارب ومقالات كثيره وكتب كنا جبناها من الانترنت وقريناها، وبدانا بالفعل نطور من أدائنا بصورة كبيرة جدا، وعرفنا جوهر فكرة اللاعنف بصفة عامة. وكذلك شفنا برضو أفلام وثائقية كتير موجودة على الإنترنت بتتكلم عن تجارب شعوب اللي بدأت تتكلم عن أو تطبق فكرة اللاعنف. فكان في إلهام كبير جدا للفكرة نفسها، سواء من الأفلام الوثائقية اللي شفناها أو من الكتب اللي قريناها.
As the peaceful protests grew in Tahrir Square, President Hosni Mubarak intimidated them with weapons of war.
يمكن تجربتنا مختلفة عن تجربة أدبر شوية. أدبر قدروا إنه قبل الثورة يكسبوا الجيش والشرطة معاهم. إحنا مختلفين شوية. إحنا الشرطة كان طبعا معركة كبيرة جدا، والجيش كان واقف على الحياد طول الوقت وتدخل لصالحنا في نهاية المطاف يعني. فتجربة مختلفة إلى حد كبير بيننا وبين تجربة أدبر في صربيا.
Even after violent clashes with police, the revolutionary leaders restored non-violent discipline in the face of overwhelming force. The protesters faced brutal attacks from police and security forces, but they held their ground.
طبعا التكنولوجيا كان لها دور كبير جدا في التواصل بصوره اسرع، في توصيل الرسائل للناس كلها وحشدهم احيانا. كان في دور للتكنولوجيا عن طريق التنظيم الداخلي. ساعات كنا مثلا عندك مجموعات في المحافظات، فانت عايز تكون على تواصل دائم بمجموعاتك في المحافظات، فبدل ما نعمل اجتماع كل اسبوعين لرؤوس المحافظات، طبعا ممكن عن طريق فيسبوك، عن طريق سيكريت جروب على الفيسبوك، عن طريق كونفرنس على الياهو او على سكايب او على بالتوك، عن اي برنامج نستخدمه للتواصل باستمرار. كل الحاجات دي ساعدت كتير عن طريق نشر الافكار.
As Muslims and Christians guarded each other while they prayed, the leaders of the revolution were persuading the army to support the protesters.
ولكن ايه اللي خلى الجيش يساندنا في الاخر؟ اعتقد ان الجيش اصلا من الناس، يعني مجندين الجيش جزء من الشعب، والجيش ليه دور وطني كبير جدا. الشرطه قد يكون لها دور في تزوير الانتخابات، في حمايه الفاسدين، فمتورطين من سنين طويله، وبالتالي يدافعوا عن مصالحهم وعن بقائهم. كنت لسه راجع ميدان التحرير وداخل على الميدان من بوابات التفتيش اللي كنا عاملينها باستمرار يعني، وكان في كافيتيريا تقريبا وشغاله تلفزيون بصوت عالي.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أيها المواطنون، في هذه الظروف العصيبة التي تمر بها البلاد، قرر الرئيس محمد حسني مبارك تخليه عن منصب رئيس الجمهورية
خطاب التنحي. فجننت لما سمعت الخطاب يعني، وقعدت اعيط، اللي هو اخيرا الحلم اللي بقالنا سنين استحملنا كتير عشانه حصل يعني. كان يعني لحظة بجد صعبة. دخلت الميدان بعدها جري عمال ازعق، لقيت الناس كلها بيعيطوا بيصرخوا بيضحكوا بيرقصوا بيغنوا. كان طبعا لحظة تاريخية يعني. وكان احساس بعدها انه يعني مش مصدق، يعني قعدت كذا يوم مش متخيل يعني معقول.
Somebody knew what they were doing, and we don't need anyone claiming credit for us or me or anyone if it's not deserved and if it's not documented.
Massacre in Juma, 15 so far killed.
Osama Monajed is a communications expert and one of the leaders of the Syrian uprising.
This is a video of a kid that's been shot at. One brother is shouting, "My brother, my brother."
He coordinates a network of secret cameras all over the country.
It's just a basic HD camera linked to a satellite modem, and we upload it on a streaming website where we can get the live feed. And we managed to get this to Al Jazeera today. Gene Sharp's tactics and theories are being practiced on the streets of Syria as we speak now. What we did is promote these tactics and explain them to people through the Facebook pages that we have, and also the YouTube channels. This is how they're applied, from putting flowers on the spots where fallen heroes fell in the demonstrations, from graffiti campaign while you march, from cleaning streets and making it nicer and better, because we can do something even better than the regime can do in terms of services. So yeah, from dictatorship to democracy gives you the inspiration, the assurances that this could really be achieved and this can really happen.
In summer 2011, after a brutal onslaught by the Syrian military, Osama travelled to Boston to meet Jean.
When were you last here? I don't remember exactly, was it 2007 or 2006? Yeah, years ago. When it was only few people thinking about non-violence, resistance, scenario in Syria. No, I mean, only quite a few believe this can really happen in a country like Syria. Okay. What's that? Gene!
Hello.
Hi.
Hi,
good to see you. Yeah, good to see you. Yeah, good to see you.
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you doing?
Not too bad. I'm happy to see you. I'm so good you have time in your schedule to come to say
Well,
hello.
pleasure is mine. It was really delighted, and there's a lot to talk about.
This is new territory for us,
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
You know, we've never been there personally.
yes.
The cases we've studied don't exactly match.
He's so humble and down to earth to a limit that you feel how amazing this is. Like all these great writings coming from a very tiny little office in old Boston. It's rather interesting.
And by the way, there's one thing that's been learned in quotation marks, maybe from Tunisia and Egypt, which I think is a mistake, major mistake. Mm-hmm. And that is that the existing ruler has to resign. He doesn't have to resign. You take all the supports from out from under him, he falls. Well, no matter what he wants to do. This is the distinction in the analyses between nonviolent coercion, in which he has to resign, but he's forced into it, and disintegration, when the regime simply falls apart. There's nobody left with enough power to resign.
If Einstein was the genius in physics, so Gene Sharp is the genius in freedoms and how to achieve freedoms.
I feel good in a way that we're spreading the word, and if people follow Gene's advice on how to think about waging a nonviolent struggle, sooner or later they'll win. See, the advantage that we have using this form of struggle, the people against the tyrant, as long as we don't surrender, we never lose. And that's key. As long as you haven't given up, you haven't lost.
I think in the long term, Gene Sharp will be a household name. I think his books will be in every library in the world, and they will be translated into most languages. Can we survive until then? Can this institution survive until then? Well, we certainly hope so.
Politically significant nonviolent action has occurred in at least the following countries: Guatemala, Australia, Thailand, Burma, China, Japan,
Georgia, Iran, Kyrgyzstan, Russia, Serbia, Ukraine, Venezuela, Vietnam, Zimbabwe, and there'll probably be a couple more.
I think there's a father-daughter relationship developing there. They can sit down and talk, and they're on the same wavelength. She protects him, and I think she loves him as a daughter loves a father.
Gene Sharp is someone who is, of course, my personal mentor, but I think has served as that role for multitudes of people. He's someone who has dedicated his life to providing the means by which oppressed people can self-reliantly gain liberation. And that is something which I believe has changed the world and will continue to do so in dramatic ways. It's really personal stuff.
Sometimes people ask me what I really want. Do I have a dream? And I do. I dream that the oppressed people of the world will be able to learn from the available records and new experiences that this type of nonviolent struggle can be used to liberate all oppression and replace military and violent conflicts, so that you won't have to carry on struggles against terrorism anymore, because the people who might have become terrorists have instead chosen to use this kind of struggle to help out the oppressed people. This can change political systems throughout the world. My name is Gene Sharp, and that is my dream.